I'm Pam Gigante. Sober homes are often the last step for people recovering from addiction. They're meant to help them transition back to drug-free lives by living with others in recovery. But when these homes are left unregulated, those in recovery face homelessness and even death from overdoses. The city of Delray Beach has become known as the, quote, recovery capital of America, with 183 verified sober homes and another 64 unconfirmed. Experts say having this cluster of halfway houses impedes addicts from fully integrating back into a drug-free life. Now, in an effort to crack down on this crisis, Delray Beach has passed local legislation imposing stricter regulations, the first of its kind in the state of Florida. And here to detail how the city plans to implement these new laws is Delray Beach Mayor Carrie Glickstein. Mr. Mayor, thank you so much for being with us.
Good to be here, Pam.
It was great to have you on the show before, and one of the things that we talked about when we were discussing your great city is the concern about the opioid crisis and this large number of sober homes in the city. Since your visit here, the state has passed its own legislation trying to crack down on that, as we just mentioned, and now the city itself is cracking down, passing its own laws. So tell us all about this and what the city is doing in particular.
Sure, happy to. The city recently passed changes to its Code of Ordinances and Development Regulations, which require any community residents to comply with certain certification and licensing requirements. We also have certain spatial requirements inside the homes and distance in the context of sober homes, distance requirements of no closer than 660 feet, the combination of which we feel is going to provide a lot more scrutiny and accountability.
All right, we have a graphic up here kind of outlining some of those restrictions and regulations. So again, as you mentioned, it does not affect current residences, and it keeps new ones 660 feet apart. Talk for a minute about the license and the certification or accreditation, because it's not mandated by law in the state, it's encouraged. So tell us more about that, and how can we encourage these homes to become regulated?
Well, the state laws are different, they're voluntary. Ours are mandatory for all community residences. In other words, this doesn't apply, our laws don't apply to just sober homes, they apply to all community residences, so that it's not discriminatory towards people dealing with substance abuse. The subset is sober homes, and in terms of that classification, annually they're required to reapply to the city for what's called a reasonable accommodation, and they have to be certified by the Florida Association of Recovery Residences as part of that application.
So talk to us about what goes on inside those homes for people who don't really understand the recovery process. If somebody's addicted and they want to get help, where do they go first? Do they go to a treatment center where they get medical attention, and then they go, to a sober home? Explain what those sober homes actually do for addicts.
Well, the intention was they are to be the last step in the continuum of recovery, and it's to provide a more natural family-like setting for community integration. The problem really is that they haven't been used for that at all, and that many of the people that have been in sober homes are nowhere near that last step in the continuum, which impairs other people that may be further along. But to compound the problem, because of the lack of regulation, the sober homes have essentially been used to warehouse people for exploitation for treatment centers, which is really where the money nexus is in this unfortunate enterprise. Sober homes in and of themselves are really not profitable. It's the warehousing of the people in those homes for treatment providers, which is where the exploitation, abuse, fraud, patient brokering, et cetera,
occurs. So some of the more nefarious ones are almost keeping those patients addicted so that the cycle will continue, correct?
Well, there's a confluence of factors that really doesn't incentivize sobriety. In fact, quite the opposite. it really isn't a recovery industry. It is a relapse industry, in that all of the financial incentives are there for people to be recycled through treatment facilities as long as their insurance benefits are intact. And under the Affordable Care Act, every relapse is treated as essentially a new injury, and those benefits start anew.
Well, and the addiction is a very serious one. It's very difficult in many ways to get off of the drug or to recover. So talk to us about what Delray is doing. You were mentioning about going after the drug companies in and of themselves, correct? Because a lot of folks were being prescribed these drugs for something like a toothache or surgery, and now they find themselves years later addicted to these drugs. So tell us about that avenue that you're pursuing.
Sure. Well, look, addiction is a multifaceted problem. There's no single solution. The city of Delray Beach, I think, is being very proactive, and it's one thing to deal with the problem on the back end, as we have with some of these regulations we're talking about, but it's believed that 80% of the people that are suffering from substance abuse start that addiction with pharmaceutical painkillers. Originally, this type of narcotic was originally prescribed. It received FDA approval for terminally ill cancer patients, where the addictive qualities weren't really of paramount importance. And as you mentioned, now they're prolifically prescribed for any type of pain management. So the city of Delray Beach is the first city in the state of Florida to initiate legal action against many of the manufacturers of the pharmaceutical companies that are manufacturing these opioid derivative. OxyContin is one of the names that a lot of people know. That company, Purdue Pharma, has profited over $30 billion from the sale of OxyContin alone. And look, again, it's not just, there's a lot of people participating in that, but there's a lot of states pursuing the same, and I think that there's a lot of parallels to what happened in the tobacco litigation to this.
Are you coordinating with other mayors and other towns, et cetera, who are dealing with this? I mean, obviously we have a huge problem here in the state. You know, the governor said that he declared a health emergency when it came to opioid addiction in the state of Florida. There have been a lot of reports on the news. We've all seen this. I mean, it's well known nationwide that we have a problem in this country. So are you partnering, though, when you talk about legislation and going against some of these pharmaceutical companies, with other municipalities, or are states getting involved?
There are a number of states. I think 6 months from now, if I'm back here, there's going to be a long list of states, cities, and counties that are filing in the same way we are. As I mentioned, we're the first city in Florida, but there are a lot of attorney generals that are contemplating this. There is pending lawsuits now from other cities, the largest of which is Chicago, that are pursuing the same litigation.
And when we talk about these sober homes, a lot of the people who are in these homes, they're not originally Delray residents, are there? People are coming in from all over the country, are they not? Which I would imagine is also putting a strain on the local economy too.
Sure, it's a huge burden, primarily because it's really a ghost population, in that because of the lack of regulation, we don't know who's in our town. We don't know who's occupying these homes. So it's a huge drain on our first responders in terms of we calculate approximately $2,500 per 911 call, emergency call for addiction, for overdoses. We had approximately 1,600 in just our city alone in 2016. That's over $3 million that our taxpayers are subsidizing. Really a broken industry that is luring people from out of state. As you mentioned, we estimate 90% of the people that are in treatment, in recovery in our city, which I think which mimics South Florida, are not South Florida residents.
Well, and the bottom line is we just want people to get the care that they need.
We want people to get the care that we need, but I think most people are empathetic to most people. It's hard to find somebody that doesn't know someone touched with this, but we really need to be taking care of our own citizens, not importing them here from other states. We're having a hard time just keeping up with our own.
Mayor, thank you so much. It was great to have you come on the show and talk about all of this today. And if you have a comment or a story about sober homes or the opioid crisis, we want to hear from you. Send us your take. You can reach us on Facebook and Twitter at YourSouthFL. Send us a video or a comment on this topic or any other topic for that matter. We look forward to hearing from you. Recovery capital of America, with 183 verified sober homes and another 64 unconfirmed. Experts say having this cluster of halfway houses impedes addicts from fully integrating back into a drug-free life. Now, in an effort to crack down on this crisis, Delray Beach has passed local legislation imposing stricter regulations, the first of its kind in the state of Florida. And here to detail how the city plans to implement these new laws is Delray Beach Mayor Carrie Glickstein. Mr. Mayor, thank you so much for being with us.
Good to be here,
It was great to have you on the show before, and one of the things that we talked about when we were discussing your great city is the concern about the opioid crisis.
Changes to its code of ordinances and development regulations, which require any community residents to comply with certain certification and licensing requirements. We also have certain spatial requirements within inside the homes and distance requirements.
And this large number of sober homes in the city. Since your visit here, the state has passed its own legislation trying to crack down on that, as we just mentioned, and now the city itself is cracking down, passing its own laws. So tell us all about this and what the city is doing in particular.
Sure, happy to. The city recently passed.
I'm Pam Giganti. Sober homes are often the last step for people recovering from addiction. They're meant to help them transition back to drug-free lives by living with others in recovery. But when these homes are left unregulated, those in recovery face homelessness and even death from overdoses. The city of Delray Beach has become known as the, quote,